Don't. Where's this? So I'm at Leslie Cat's home.
No, that's not her.
That's not Leslie. Mute it. Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mr. Wilson from Marshall Academy, and I just wanted to stop on here today and thank everybody. First of all, thanks for coming, and thanks for being a part of Marshall Academy and this community, but also thanks for your patience with the plan. I know no one's expected this, especially us here in the schools. But I've got to thank our COVID response team headed by Mrs. Katz, and they have come together and worked tirelessly over this summer to put together a plan that I think is as comprehensive and as effective for education as we could possibly do. Not only are we able to come back 5 days, but we're also able to offer a plan for all of our students, and that's because we have such a dedicated and caring staff here, and it's also because of our size and the way that we operate within a small school building. So without further ado, I'm going to step aside. I just want to say hello and thanks to everybody for coming. But I'm going to introduce you to Mrs. Katz, and I'm going to be on the wings here. So if you have any comments during this section or questions, I'll be writing them down on a whiteboard here off to the side, and I'm going to make sure that Mrs. Katz sees the questions, and we're going to cover them. If she doesn't cover them right away, then she's probably getting to it. So we'll make sure we cover everything. And once again, thank you all for joining, and everybody, I hope you enjoy the plan, and I hope to see all of you soon. Ms. Katz.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. All right. Thank you. I am going to share the PowerPoint presentation of the plan with you so that you can follow along. I did also put this on the school website. So it's on the homepage, and if you click, it's under the newsletter postings that we've been putting out all summer. So that's where this presentation will be found. And this will be very similar to the presentation to the school board next week when they have to vote on the plan. So this is not voted on yet. We do have the school board president on our committee though. So I would say that there's a lot of support for this plan. All right, so let me share this screen with you to allow you to see this. All right. Okay, so you now should be able to see me in the little side and then the slide presentation. All right. To echo Mr. Wilson, nobody planned for this, but we did come up with a great plan, in my opinion. All right, proposal. So overview, Marshall Academy will be open for 5 days of face-to-face instruction with safety protocols. So we're not just saying come to school for 5 days like we always have. We went through, there's an airplane. We went through the plan from the governor. We went through CDC guidelines. We've been working with the Calhoun County Public Health Department. And with the protocols we're putting into place, we feel confident that we can make this a safe space 5 days a week for our students. We initially did not have a virtual option available, but with feedback and all the work we've been doing this summer, we did come up with a K-12 option through a third party. That's not to say we won't be involved in what you're doing with your online education. They have what are called success coaches. And I know Miss Farrow in the elementary for K-5 will be the success coach. She's the district contact for you and your child with that platform. And then for 6 and 12, that's myself. And I'm that district contact to make sure the program's working. You can contact the teachers that you have online for that, and we can see your progress and what's going on there. So that is, and that option is through Edgenuity. If you wanted to Google it, feel free. Rationale. So why do we feel confident that we can do this? Some of what Mr. Wilson shared is we have approximately 230 students. Parent surveys indicated early on that a lot of parents wanted 5 days a week. I think it's been hard for a lot of families trying to stay home with kids for extra months other than just summer months. Some return to normalcy, and we know that kids in a building with a teacher is the best education that we can provide. So We went with the 5 days a week and figured out how to make it happen. And we definitely can due to our size and our staff. And then the virtual option, as I mentioned, came out based on feedback because we do want to make sure that our families are taken care of and you can continue to be part of Marshall Academy. We're able to clean and disinfect the building each night. It is not a large building. We'll get into some details about how we're going to clean. And as I mentioned, we can do all the safety protocols for phase 4 while reopening. And one big part of that is we can maintain what are called cohorts for each grade level and classroom. So our kindergarten class is a cohort. They're together and they're going to be together all day, but they're not going to be mixing with a bunch of other grade levels. So in the event that something happens, a positive case or something, it's limited to a classroom and not 4 classes or 4 rooms across the building because we're able to keep them in those cohorts. All right, so phases. I'm not sure how much everyone's been reading up on this, but the phases refer to the phases of reopening in Michigan, the reopening plan. So phases 1 through 3 is the virus testing is high, hospitals in certain areas are overwhelmed. And in this instance, if the governor says our region is in phases 1 through 3, nobody in the county can do in-person instruction, including us, even with our 5-day plan. So that's when remote learning happens for everybody. And the Marshall Academy teachers take to Google Classrooms or ClassTag and they start to teach that way. A lot like the spring, but we learned a lot from our spring plan and what worked and didn't work. And we've adapted and changed that based on some feedback there to make it better in the event that this should happen. Phase 4 is where a region is right now. So we are able to say we can have in-person instruction, and that's where we have the 5 days a week with safety protocols. And if numbers keep getting better and better and we move into phase 5 during the school year, still 5 days of instruction and safety protocols, it lightens things up a little bit when you get into phase 5, and then anything after phase 5 is considered post-pandemic. All right, so let's talk about phase 4 because that's the big one. 1 through 3, we're in Google Classrooms. Phase 5 is a lot like phase 4. So phase 4 is where the focus of what's happening really needs to be. So learning options is the face-to-face instruction 5 days a week. That's kind of the normal school, if you will. And then there's a virtual option for all students through that third party where you have your district contact of either Miss Farrell or myself. It is a self-paced program, the virtual option. So how your student interacts with it and how you're working with it is you get to work ahead. If you get behind, then you have to make up some time later. It is also a semester commitment. So it is not even feasible to think about the fact that if a student were to do virtual for 2 months and then decide they wanted to come for 5 days of instruction, where that break is in instruction and learning and assessment and everything. So if you commit to the virtual option, it has to be for a semester at a time. Now, our semester changes in January. So from December to January, we can make a decision, you and your family, based on what's best for you, if you want to continue virtual in second semester or if you want to come back to in-person instruction, if that's where we are. So that is something to think about with that semester commitment. Okay. When I say remote learning and virtual learning, I want to make sure you guys understand what I'm saying. So remote learning is if Marshall Academy has to close for any of the following reasons. State mandate, the governor says schools have to close because of the phases. If we have to quarantine a specific class due to a positive case, or the closing of the whole district as advised by the Calhoun County Public Health Department if they're closing schools in the area, but it's not a state mandate. All of those, that's when the teachers here at Marshall Academy go remote. So they're doing the Google Classroom. They're doing the learning from that plan that we had in the spring with those improvements. Virtual learning is that third party. We sign your student up for a full class schedule, and they have to log in from home and work on that. And again, it's that semester commitment. So some things to think about in both remote learning and virtual learning is the need for technology. So we will be asking more survey questions and really honing in on who needs what. You need a reliable device, a Chromebook or a tablet or a laptop. Phones are okay for a lot of things, but really having something a little bit bigger is better. And then you need some reliable internet. So whether that's, we tell you some great places that are doing community internet availability, or if it's finding out what kind of service is provided in the area, but we will assist as we can. Okay, so that's remote versus virtual. Okay, special education virtually. This has come up a lot, so I want to make sure we touch on this. The students, if you're a Marshall Academy student, your caseworker is your caseworker. So that's either Miss Best in the elementary or Miss Swank in the high school and later middle school. You would switch to what's called consult. So instead of that teacher pushing into classrooms because that student is virtually, it's more of a consultation. They email, they call, they might hold a Zoom meeting weekly to check in and see what's going on. The caseworker, Best or Swank, can also talk to the online teachers and make sure the accommodations are in the classes that are available through the program. Some of those accommodations are the content can be read to the student, there can be extra time, there can be retakes. The progress monitoring towards special ed goals will happen with Miss Best and Miss Swank even virtually. It'll just be done virtually. So they'll have some programs through the internet, or they might Zoom with a student to check on and do that progress monitoring. So that will still happen even if you choose virtual. All right, so some details with phase 4 instruction. There were a lot of concerns that we closed school early last spring and students were missing instructional time. Some kids did more than others. Teachers deal with this all the time. Sometimes you get students who were in a different program and it was at a different speed. You're going to get a classroom of students who are high, low, anywhere in between. That's what teachers do. They figure out, where are students? What do I need to teach to get them back to where they need to be? So that is going to happen whether we're remote teaching or whether we're in the classroom. So we will figure out what your students need to know, build on anything they may have not gotten before, and keep growing. K-5, this is a little bit different. K-2 has always done standards-based grading, but we're going to push 3-5 to do standards-based grading this year, whether we're in person, remote, or virtual. And it's a better way for them to fluidly move in and out of that and really assess where your student is. Are they going to be ready for the next grade? So these are things that we really want your student to master for the next grade level. And who knows, if it works really well this year, we may do K-5 standards-based grading in the future as well, and not just for this time. It's a great way to assess students and make sure they're progressing. All students in 3 through 12 for in-person instruction will be given training in Google Classroom in the event that we have to move to remote learning. So I keep telling everyone, give me the students, even if it's for a month, even if it's for 2 weeks. Let me have the students for a couple weeks so we can teach them the ins and outs of the Google Classroom and the G Suite, because we really, really don't want any students to struggle with that, and that's what holds them back from participating and getting their education this year. So we're going to build Google Classroom in throughout the year, whether we're in person or not, because we want them to learn that. And it might be a little early in 3rd grade to be thinking about this, but a lot of our high school students dual enroll, and they dual enroll with online classes. And those online platforms for college classes are similar to Google Classroom. So it's not a bad skill for any of our students to learn. Okay, phase 4 emotional supports. It's a crazy time. No one's denying that. Everyone's had ups and downs. It's a roller coaster. Some days it's great to be, stuck at home. And then some days I'm going to pull my hair out. What am I going to do? So we are going to make sure we are monitoring students and families for health and wellness. We'll reach out. please reach out to us if you have any needs. We've created a collection of supports, whether that's emotional support, mental support, food pantries, you name it. It is on the last newsletter that I published today, earlier this morning. So it'll be on the website, and I'll put it specifically on the website as a separate document as well. But even if navigating that isn't helpful for you because it's, I don't know, reach out to us. We will have someone contact you and help you. And we're going to do that all year because it's a crazy time and we're all in this together. Teachers are going to continue to hold morning meetings. This is something we've been doing. In the morning, the students eat breakfast in the classroom with their homeroom teacher, and we'll ask questions, do different activities to build that community in the classroom so that the emotional support is there and the safety is there. All right, so safety protocols. How can we be in the building for 5 days and feel safe? Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to be here 5 days and I'm going to feel safe, and I'm going to put my daughter here and she's in second grade and I feel that she's going to be safe. So I know I'm a teacher, so I might, have a bias with the school because I love it, but I'm also a parent and I am putting my own child in this building too, and I feel confident with it. So I just wanted to share that with you. We're doing all the required safety protocols for phase 4. And the cohorts that I mentioned are K-8. So kindergarten through 8th grade will be in their classrooms with their cohorts. In 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, our middle school model has different math teachers and ELA and science teachers, but those teachers are going to come into the classroom to those students. That's less time transitioning in hallways. That's less germs from one room to another room that someone else is going to go into. It's just that adult moving. So that's a lot better containing that. There's going to be 6 feet of distance between cohorts. So anytime 7th and 8th grade might be in the gymnasium, say for lunch, they're going to at least be 6 feet away, probably more like 10 feet, but they're going to maintain 6 feet of distance. Now, we're not guaranteeing 6 foot of distance within a classroom. So the cohort might be closer than 6 feet, but anytime they're outside of their cohort, it will be 6 foot distancing. All right. Phase 4, masks. Okay, we can't get into political debates. We can't talk about whether we believe it or not. That's not what this is. This is a requirement to have school. So all staff have to wear masks all the time. We even have to wear masks in phase 5, so that doesn't even get us out of that. 6-12 students in phase 4 wear masks at all times. And K-5 students wear masks in common areas, but not in classrooms with their cohorts. So K through 5 would be wearing masks, for instance, on the bus, if they ride the bus, if they get dropped off when they come into the building until they get into their classroom. If they're traveling in the hallway for any reason, they would have to have their mask on. When they're going to the cafeteria, they have to have their mask on. Of course, they take it off when they're eating. We're looking at getting lanyards for the students that clip their masks to them so that those younger students especially, well, where's my mask? Did I drop it? It's around your neck when you're not wearing it on your face. And that is going to be, I think, a really great way to help with some of those concerns about, well, where's the mask and who's touching it and what's going on? So they're going to wear it. In fact, I probably want one because that would be helpful, especially at lunchtime. So that is something we're going to do. Okay, cleaning. So again, it's a small building. I think I say that all the time. The common touch surfaces will be cleaned by our custodian 2 times a day. In a run through, it took 20 to 30 minutes to hit all the doorknobs, all of the light switches in the hallway, the bathroom counters and faucets and the stool handle or the stall handles and everything. So that's happening after arrival, so probably between 8:30 and 9, because everyone will kind of be in and there was a high traffic time, so we're going to clean. And then we're going to do it again after lunchtime because you've got traffic in the halls, people are going to the bathroom, and we're going to clean again after that. And then, of course, we'll clean each night, so all those will get wiped down even more. And again, staff. Okay, most teachers are germaphobes secretly, or out there in the open about it, like myself. So we're definitely going to remind and instruct students about hygiene and proper hand washing. What's great in the elementary is all of the elementary classrooms have a bathroom that's just their bathroom in the classroom. So teachers can build in procedures where kids are going and washing their hands pretty regularly. And even in the high school, the science room and the math room, believe it or not, have sinks, and they will have soap as well. And so those students can be washing their hands whenever they're in science and math. We're separating the bathrooms. The middle schoolers will use the locker rooms, and the high schoolers will use the hallway bathrooms here. So there are different bathrooms for different cohorts and grade sections. And then, of course, we'll have hand sanitizer the students can use as they enter a room. Okay, social distancing. Staff, it's really important that we social distance from each other. As if you were here at the beginning, Mr. Wilson came on and I was standing really far away. And then when he left, I came in. Last thing we want is all of the teachers to get sick at once. So we're social distancing from each other. And we're going to try to social distance from the students as much as possible. And I say as much as possible because if you're an elementary teacher, sometimes you know that kid who's crying, how are you going to stay 6 feet away and talk to them? That's just not emotionally supportive, right? So we'll have to keep in mind some of that. The general rule is no more than 15 minutes within 6 feet of someone to be a main contact. So I don't know if we all have to get timers on our watches or carry around something, but we know there are going to be situations where the 6 feet's not possible. However, as a high school or middle school teacher, I could mark out my room, okay, more than 6 feet from where I'm sitting now, as long as I'm 6 feet away from all my students while I'm teaching and everything, that's great because then I'm not a main contact should something happen. We're going to limit hallway transition and traffic. It's going to be tricky for a little while because I could let my students go into the hallway, go to their lockers, get their things. They get ready to go to the next room. That room comes out. We just don't want them all in the hallway at the same time. That seems a recipe for disaster. So we're going to control that. Even though we have a bell system, we're going to have to rely more on teachers telling the kids when to go and come in. When the weather's nice, we all have exit doors. That'll be the best part of this. So that'll really help. Parents, please be aware there are no visitors in phase 4 in the school building. You can come to the front desk and, turn things into the office, drop something off for your student, but you're not allowed into the building itself in phase 4. So no visitors. Now that doesn't exclude volunteers. We have some programs that volunteer to work in the buildings with students, mentoring and things of that nature. They'll be screened and trained and they can come in at that time, but no visitors. So you can't come in and eat lunch with your kids, no birthday parties in the classroom where parents come in. So that's a little sad, but just remember it's a safety measure. Okay, specials. There were a lot of questions. Well, is my kid going to get recess? Are they going to get PE? How about music? We're going to do specials. And I put these next 2 points here because they don't really fit anywhere else, but it kind of seemed special to me. So classroom windows will be open, weather permitting. Every room has at least 2 classroom windows. Might have been open all day, having airflow. That is a CDC guideline and a suggestion to really help. Classes can also teach outside. I love talking about books and poetry outside. You better believe that in English class, we're going to be going outside as much as possible. And then you can separate and you don't have to be so worried. And if you want to get really far away and go take your mask off for a second, fine, and then come back, right? Specials are going to come to the classroom as much as possible in elementary. So that means that Mr. Knock will be going to the 3rd grade room for music. And they're only allowed to sing outside if they're outside and spaced out. But he's also going to teach them percussion instruments so they can learn xylophones and bells and drums and other creative ways to teach music that's not blowing through instruments and getting germs everywhere, right? PE. Let's take them outside as much as possible, obviously. And when not, you can spread them out in the gym and you can play non-contact sports, kickball. You barely touch the ball, you kick it, you're already spaced out at the bases. So those kinds of things will be thought of as we plan ahead. And then music and band, as I mentioned, is going to focus on percussion. So it will be different, but Mr. Knock is committed to those musical lessons and making it fun for the students. So that is still happening. Arrival and dismissal. What will that look like? Well, bussers, you'll need to wear masks at all times on the bus. So keep that in mind. Students will get a little squirt of hand sanitizer as they get on the bus. And then we have bus aides. They're going to be temp checking riders. This week's newsletter talked a lot about screeners and what happens if there's a fever or a positive test. And really screening is one of the best ways to keep COVID out of your school. And even if the fever isn't caused by COVID, you shouldn't be in school with a fever because you could be spreading the flu. You could be spreading something else. So we are going to temp check bus riders. Not all before they board the bus. We're going to have some buffer seats. So if someone presents a fever, we put them at those seats, bring them to school. We have a quarantine room set up, and we'll call parents and guardians to come and get the student. And we can help you with what the next steps are from there. We're working on some handouts to come home to parents, checklists of things. Can I send my kid to school? Should my kid stay home? If my kid stays home, what's the next step? So we're going to have some very nice charts and flow charts for you to help you with that. But you can always call, and we can always walk you through the process as well. Ms. Keever, the front desk secretary, is part of the COVID planning team so that she has this information and she's up to date so she can help you with that as she's the one answering the phones right away, right? All right. And then for drop-offs and for everyone exiting, the K6, 7, and 8. So K8 all have their own entrance and exit, whether it's a portico or an outside exit door. And so they're all entering and exiting separately. When you drop off elementary at the portico. They would scan their temperature and then they would walk to the appropriate door. So we'll mark out some social distancing there if a line kind of builds up. And then the older students will get screened under the portico by the main office, the high school end, and we'll go from there as well. Okay, recess, sports, and extracurriculars. Ms. Sweat has been wonderful on the committee, and she's marking out recess areas with some colored flags so she can say, kindergarten, you're in the yellow area today, and they can go play in the yellow area. And first grade, you're in the blue area, and they go to the blue area. So that it's less confusing if you just say color areas, and there'll be people out there to watch each area and help monitor that the kids aren't mixing their cohorts, right? Sports are going to follow MHSAA guidelines. Whatever they say is kind of what we do. And extracurriculars can still happen with social distancing and mask wearing. Extracurriculars mix the cohorts, so everyone has to wear a mask regardless of age if there's an extracurricular across grade levels. And then field trips are suspended for the year. The traveling and the mixing and going to public places is just not a good idea when we're trying to be as safe as possible. Okay, cafeteria and food service. So some questions about that, because, you know, you get into the cafeteria and there's lots of kids and everyone's eating and you don't have your masks on and they're all shouting to be heard over everyone. So what is that going to look like? Well, breakfast, we've already been doing breakfasts in the classroom, but they used to go to the cafeteria and grab their stuff and then go to their classroom. Instead, when they arrive, they're going straight to their classroom or their homeroom in the high school. And our cafeteria workers are going to bring the breakfasts to them, pre-bagged for them, and then we'll eat in our classrooms, which is a safer space. Lunch is still happening in the cafeteria, but we are limiting it to just a few grades in there at a time. So K1-2 has a time. The kindergarten tables will be at least 6 feet away from the first grade tables, which will be at least 6 feet away from the second grade tables, and they'll all be facing the same way. That's one of those safety recommendations that we're doing to be extra safe, is if everyone's facing the same way instead of in towards each other. That's not a great idea. And then we will have space at the tables as well between students so they're not as tight with their masks off and eating and everything. There's also going to be built-in hand washing before you go to the cafeteria and when you leave the cafeteria, because you've been using your hands and everything. So we have those for the teachers to build in. All right, that is my presentation and overview as a whole. Again, this is available on the school website, but I'm available now for questions. Mr. Wilson's going to look through the comments and kind of tell me what I might need to tackle. And of course, you can always email me if you have any questions. My email is katz, K-A-T-Z-L for Leslie, @marshallacademy.org. And we will get you answers as quickly as possible. And so questions, Mr. Wilson, did anything come up that I need to address?
Legal taking the child's temperatures, the legality of it.
The legality of taking the child's temperature. It's not illegal to take your child's temperature. We checked.
We always have.
We do that at school when someone is suspected to have a fever. So we are allowed to take a temperature.
We did check with our legal representation.
And we checked with our legal representation that is fine. Yep. So it's safe. But thanks for looking out for us.
CACC and Math and Science Center students.
CACC and Math and Science Center students. The Career Center, I was informed this week, is going virtual for the first 9 weeks, and they will make a decision after that. So what we're going to have available for our students who are on that schedule is we will provide them a space and technology to work on those virtual classes here if they want to stay after their required classes in the morning, and then work on it here at the school until the buses leave or regular pickup. Or Mr. Lowe, if Clara wants to leave early, she can do it at home. I see the comments. I just couldn't keep up with them while I was presenting. I can't see them when I share my screen. So is that it? So I'm either a really good presenter or I missed something. Okay. Oh, thank you, Mr. Lowe. I appreciate that. I think we've covered a lot in more detail than the presentation as well in those newsletters, which are on the school's homepage. So you can also click on those and read through a lot of it. And the link to the plan will also be on there. Yeah, the board meeting to approve the plan will be next Wednesday at 6 p.m. here in the gymnasium, so we can space people out if we have a lot of public there. And myself and several of the team members will be there. We'll present it kind of like we presented it to you, but they already have the written plan to overview to make sure they understand it. And it's not like the first time the board has heard about it. We talked about it last month at our board meeting as well and kind of gave them the overview. We've just worked out details since then. So should not be a big political nightmare at the board meeting. It should be a, here's our plan. Anyone have better suggestions? If we do, we'll put them into place and then we'll be good to go.
Still another question.
Another question.
Our size.
Well, what's the question? What's the question?
Oh, sorry. How do you defend opening when so many other schools are not?
How do we defend opening when so many other schools are not? Okay, so really, I think that goes down to size. We really feel confident we can keep the students in those cohorts, so there won't be that domino effect of all these kids are sick and everything's happening. We can clean. It's really about size. I mean, sometimes size can be hard because we can't offer everything that bigger schools do, and sometimes budgets are tighter. But in this instance, being small, man, if you can clean every touch point in 20-30 minutes, that's pretty fantastic. All right. Okay. I know the comments are a little bit slow, so I want to wait before I end the broadcast, but I will save it so it's here on the YouTube channel. If you want to share it with someone to view, we'll put it on our Facebook page again as well. And then, oh, someone likes our plan. Yay. Thank you. I appreciate that personally, and so does the team. But all right. Okay, excellent. Well, I'm not going to keep people because I don't like meetings that are more than an hour. So,
when will we know how many kids are in our class?
When will we know how many kids are in our class? Well, next week I have scheduling appointments for high school, and I will make sure students get into the system so we can check numbers at that point. Not that we don't always know what enrollment is in the office, so they know, we have 24 kids. But sometimes there's 1 or 2 kids that, gosh, we really don't know if they're coming back, and nobody will return our phone calls. So we're like, they might be here. There might be 24 kids in this class. It might be 23. So honestly, as a teacher, I've come to realize I shouldn't make name tags or anything like that until September, now with the 2 weeks in August. So after the first 2 weeks of school, I know for sure how many kids I have. But yeah, we've got our eye on the numbers to make sure we aren't going over that cap that we originally planned with 26 and going from there. So 2 questions.
Will the virtual learning be totally separate from Marshall Academy?
Will the virtual learning be totally separate from Marshall Academy? Not totally separate. It's not Marshall Academy teachers. There are online teachers with the program that you would ask direct questions to, but you have, they call them success coaches. It's your contact. So K5, you contact with Miss Farrow. She's going to become the expert on the K5 platform for that, and she can support that way. And then 612, I have a training to become the expert on the 612 platform. And so if you have questions, I can support. And then if your student is a special ed student, your caseworker, Miss Best or Miss Swank, will also be able to support in that. Yes, and part of that district contact is the teachers of those classes contact us with the progress. So if they aren't getting a lot of work from a student or a family and they're concerned, they share that with us because we know you and we can reach out to you. And if we have to, we can have Miss Jackson knock on your door and say, why aren't you getting on your virtual classes, right? So we definitely will be involved in that sense. But no, if you're doing high school virtual, I'm not the teacher for that. Sorry.
What about high school kids being able to switch classes without having a cohort, but they have younger siblings?
With the high school kids being able to switch classes, what about those having younger siblings? So I think you're really going into contact tracing at that point. So for contact tracing with the Calhoun County Health Department, the idea is that let me do a for instance here. So let's say a third grader gets a positive case. They will investigate with our assistants whether or not all of those third graders need to go into quarantine or just some of them. Now, if a third grader has to go into quarantine because a classmate was positive, if that third grader has a sibling in a different grade, that sibling can still come to school because they were not a main contact of the positive case. Now, let me pick on Mrs. Miller for a second. Mrs. Miller has a first grader and a kindergartner. If her first grader is positive, then her kindergartner, because she's in the household with her other kid, has to stay home. So if there's a positive case in your household, you have to stay home, but you only have to get quarantined if there's a positive case in your grade level. I think that answers your question, but I'll wait in case it didn't.
Jamie asked, are they still using their school emails if they're doing virtual?
Yes, please always use your school email for everything school related. Do not use personal accounts.
If we are virtual, can we participate in sports?
Yes. If you are virtual, you can participate in sports. I had to look that one up. That was a tricky one for me, but I found it. Mm-hmm. But eligibility still applies. So your students have to be on track with their virtual classes in order to be able to participate and be eligible.
What about dual enrolled students for, say, Albion College? Are they still being exposed to a larger group of people?
So if you're dual enrolled at Albion, because they're still doing in person, there will be exposure more on that campus. However, I know Albion is putting in a system for a lot of testing and screening, and they're kind of really doing a lot because they want to come back in person, where a lot of schools are doing just virtual for the semester. So I would say I would recommend following those protocols. And again, the point of main contact, you don't have to quarantine unless you've been a main contact of a positive case. And if you can maintain 6 feet and you both have masks, or even further than that, then you aren't necessarily a main contact. So if you maintain that social distance and you wear that mask when you're around people that aren't part of your household, then you are less likely to need to quarantine because of a positive case. Yeah. You guys are asking great questions.
Great class.
I feel like I'm teaching again, which just makes my heart sing.
What happens if there is a case in the building?
What happens if there's a case in the building? So kind of back to my example a little bit earlier, it goes back to contact tracing and who needs to quarantine. So I'll pick on a different grade this time because I always use my daughter's grade in 2nd grade. I don't know why. But let's say 5th grade. So let's say there's a positive case of a student in 5th grade. We'll work with the health department to contact trace. Likely the 5th grade will be main contacts. And the 5th grade, so those students who are main contacts, have to quarantine for 14 days to be safe. And during those 14 days, you monitor for symptoms. But what we're going to do is that 5th grade teacher then moves to remote and Google Classroom so that you're all still getting that education for those 14 days of quarantine from your teacher. Now, it's different if it's an adult, right? So let's say it's the 4th grade teacher who's the positive case. Well, those 4th grade students are probably at that point going to be main contacts. So they all go into quarantine for 14 days. But as long as she's feeling well enough and up to it, she'll remote teach. If she's not feeling well and up to it, we do have someone from our management company who's used to be an elementary teacher, elementary administrator. She's going to create content in the Google Classroom for us, for your students, if our teacher is too sick to be able to do that. Yeah.
Would siblings of main contacts need to isolate? What will happen with their education?
Will siblings of main contacts? You only have to isolate if you are a main contact. So if you have a 3rd grader and a 9th grader, and the 3rd grade class has to quarantine because there was a positive case, the 9th grade sibling of a 3rd grader doesn't have to unless they were a main contact. So it's 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon. But it's that idea that you only quarantine if you're a main contact. So no, siblings don't have to just because one of their siblings has to. Now, if you need to, because your 3rd grader can't stay home alone and your 9th grader needs to stay with them, then we will work with you to provide content for your 9th grader as well. So they're not also missing out on 14 days of education.
If a student has to quarantine, do they need to be tested before returning to school? If
a student has to be quarantined, well, hang on, because I'm thinking about quarantining differently. Okay, so let's go to if your student has symptoms or doesn't get through the screener, they mark something, check, we have shortness of breath, we have a cough, we have a fever. In that instance, you would be in the school quarantine room and we would call you and tell you to pick them up. There are a couple ways you can get back to school. So one is a negative test that says you do not have COVID. Another is a doctor with an explanation of your symptoms that is not COVID. So a flu test. Well, it's actually the flu. It's not COVID. You still have to wait until you're not symptomatic anymore and you're fever-free for 24 hours without fever-reducing medicine to come back. So we would either need a negative COVID test, a doctor diagnosis that says it's not COVID, and know that you've been fever-free for 24 hours. If you don't want to get either of those for whatever reason, then you would have to quarantine your child for at least 10 days before they can come back to school. Okay. Good.
These are good questions.
These are great questions.
If a family has a person that tests positive and thus the family needs to quarantine for 14 days, what happens to their educational services?
Okay, so if a family member is positive and then so the whole family has to isolate at that point, really, right? Well, that is probably going to be a longer period if you have a household case. It could be up to 24 days where you're not able to go anywhere because it's not just quarantining for 10 days. It's after that person is not symptomatic anymore, and then it's 14 days after that. So it could be a really long time. So again, back to something we said before, if a sibling had to stay home with a younger sibling because parents are working, we will figure out a way to provide an education for the students that are home and have to be quarantined and isolated. So that might be work packets, that might be Google Classroom. We will figure that out on a case-by-case basis. But again, being small, we can do that. When we know a family is at home, we can figure out what we need to do to help that family. Absolutely. Love it.
The numbers have dropped off down to 15 now. Questions?
Okay.
Great job.
Excellent. Well, you guys are awesome. You asked great questions, good things for me to think about, including in the newsletter for the next update. I'm not going to say next week because I probably will put it out in the next couple days because I'm trying to get you as much information as possible before that board meeting. You're welcome to come to the board meeting. You don't have to by any means. If you have a question that you want them to address, you could always send it to me. I'm the recording secretary for the board as well, and I can make sure the president gets that for public comment. So you can always do it that way. So, all right. Well, I appreciate everyone taking time. I will post this on the website. I'm always available. Email me. If you email me, you might want to turn your email notifications off at night because sometimes I email really late and I don't want it to wake you up at night. So think about that if you're going to email me a question. All right. It was really great to kind of talk with all of you. All right. I'm going to end it. It takes a second when I do that, but bye, everybody.